Shun-chan かわいいよ。かわいいよ。Hi. I've been married to my husband, who's Japanese, for a little over 4 years now. We live in Hyogo, Japan, and have a son, Shun-chan. Today I want to talk about 5 of the things that my husband and I tend to argue or have misunderstandings about. I was already fluent in Japanese and had been living in Japan for a while before I started dating my husband. And I feel like my personality fits well with Japanese culture, so we didn't have many of the language and cultural barriers that some international couples might have. But I think the things that I'm going to talk about now are things that everyone with a Japanese spouse might experience. 1. Language differences and misunderstandings. The nuance in words are different in Japanese and English, or sometimes they're not used the same way. So for example, my husband had a big glass of orange juice before bed, and I was like, "Are you sure that sugar," and I said sato, "won't keep you up?" And he said, "This is 100% juice. There's no sato in it." And I was like, "Well, sugar is naturally in fruit, so yeah, there is sugar." Sato. After we argued a bit about it, he showed me proof. Online it says that there isn't sato in 100% juice, just tobun or sugar content. In English, sugar and sugar are the same word, conversationally at least, but in Japanese, there's a difference between those two words and their meaning. Things like that happen a lot. Another big one is English words that are used in Japanese. I'm not a big fan of katakana loanwords, and a lot of the time their meaning pronunciation is completely different. My husband and I have had conversations that go nowhere because one of us is using one of these loanwords thinking that we have the same understanding of what it means, but in reality, the meaning of the word is very different. 2. Medical advice and doctors. The US, where I grew up, and Japan have some differences in how to treat certain conditions, and I also have a few rare health issues, so I'm used to advocating for myself and discussing all possible options with doctors. That is done less here, and I think my husband feels like it's rude to question the doctor, but I see it in a different way. Now that we have a son, I want to make sure that he gets the best treatment and doesn't have anything unnecessary done. So I like to compare the doctor's advice to what the advice would be in the US and discuss that with my doctor here. Understandably, my husband feels frustrated that I would think the internet is more accurate than a doctor's advice because that's, where I can show him the information. But honestly, having a non-Japanese body, and maybe because I grew up in the US, a lot of the treatments don't work the same way for me. I might need stronger medications, and some things might not work for me at all. My son is half non-Japanese, so I think that could be the case for him too. Shun-chan had a minor health issue that, if isn't resolved by age 5 in the US, requires surgery. But here, if it's not resolved by age 1, then they do surgery. It ended up resolving itself in about a month's time, so we didn't have to think about it. But I definitely would have wanted to really discuss things with the doctor had surgery been recommended. We're both Shun-chan's parents, and we both want what's best for him, obviously. But since I grew up somewhere else, I have a different perspective, and we sometimes have to kind of argue through that to make a decision together that we're both okay with. This kind of goes into my next point. 3. My husband doesn't want to rock the boat or ask what he feels are unnecessary questions, even though I personally have no reservations in doing so. An example of this is when my husband was ordering food for us and there was tartar sauce on many of the menu's items, but it wasn't included in the meal that I wanted. So I asked if my husband could see if they sell the sauce separately and if they could put it on my food for a little bit more money. He didn't want to ask because most Japanese people probably wouldn't. You don't really alter food here unless you have an allergy. But my thinking is worst case they say no, and best case they say yes, so there's not really an issue in asking, in my opinion. It's not like a work dinner or anything either, or someone else paying for us. It's just us. He doesn't mind if I ask, but I think he feels a little bit embarrassed when I do. This is a culture difference, but also I think as a foreigner living in Japan, it's necessary for me to at times speak up and ask questions, so I'm used to that, which kind of goes into my next point. 4. My husband doesn't realize how hard getting some things done as a foreigner can be. When we got married, I changed my last name and I had to go update all my accounts. I told my husband that I would be going to the bank to update my name, so I would likely need to take a half day off of work. My husband said this can be done in 5 minutes. You just go on your lunch break. But considering how many issues there were when we got married, like a week after we thought we were done, being told, actually, we need your birth certificate, and then a few days later, actually, you want to look at your passport again, I knew it wouldn't be that easy. It ended up taking 3 hours to update my name with the bank. They asked me which nationality I chose when I got married, and I told them I don't get to choose, I'm still American. But the woman was confused and she said there's no proof of me being an American. My passport and residency card weren't proof, I guess. I think she just had never had to change a name for a foreigner and didn't want to do it wrong. So I watched as she asked all 20 or so people in the office, and they all said that I do get to choose my nationality. And so I said, well, if I get to choose, please put me down as Japanese. I think she could tell I was being sarcastic, so she spent an hour or so looking up things on her computer, and she eventually called the bank's main office and they told her that my residency card was proof of my nationality. So from there I finally got my name change updated after she looked at my residency card that I had handed her when I first came in. A lot of times I'm told that something can't be done and I have to show them that it can be by referencing something on the internet, perhaps the company's own website. This doesn't bother me so much, I just kind of expect it and am pleasantly surprised when things get done quickly. I think it's just a part of living abroad. You know, I'm sure it's hard for people in the US living abroad as well, but pretty much every time it takes much longer than it would for my husband. So we sometimes argue a bit about how much time needs to be set aside to get things done.
帽子かわいいかわいいねピッピッピッ
Work and overtime expectations. Probably the hardest thing about being married to a working Japanese person. To some extent in Japan, you're expected to put the company first. If there's a problem at work, workers might be expected to leave a vacation early to help deal with it, for example. A more extreme example, my due date was going to overlap with an important business trip that my husband had to go on, and he was told that he could leave if I went into labor, but he would still be expected to go on the trip, even though I could potentially give birth at any time and would be alone. Of course, the pandemic ended up happening, so that was canceled, but those types of situations happen relatively often. And my husband also works a lot of overtime, so during the week I don't have a lot of help. Things are changing and companies might be more flexible, but Japanese people tend to work very long hours and have a lot of pressure and responsibility placed on them. This was really hard in the beginning of our relationship. I felt like, why not say something? Why not, ask them to reconsider? Why not say no more? Kind of a Western way of thinking. But to my husband, if he pushes too much, then some people could feel resentment and his workplace would become uncomfortable, which you definitely don't want if you have to spend the majority of your time there. My husband chooses to spend his free time with us, Shun-chan and I. He puts his family first and truly loves to be with us, so I think that helps. As long as he's home safe every night, I'm okay with it being late because we spend a lot of time together on the weekends. I also now have backup plans in case our plans have to get canceled because of a work issue, so I don't really feel bothered by it too much anymore. But I think this is probably the hardest part of being married to a Japanese working person, because we as foreigners, even if we work at a Japanese company, we will never quite understand the social pressure and expectations that are put upon Japanese people. If you are in an international relationship, I'm interested in hearing what you and your spouse argue about, or what you have heard your international couple friends argue about. I put up vlogs like this in both English and Japanese every week, so I hope to see you again. Thank you so much for watching.
Bye bye. Jang.
Jang, jajang.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Bye bye. 痛い痛い痛い。シュン大変だ。大変だ。大変だ。大変だ。大変だ。大変だ。
Jangan.